Hello everybody. So in our last video, I love my analogies and I like my little metaphors. So I try to make, my point through some other third party, image or idea. And I don't know if that's helping or not. But I chose to use the idea of a camera and how when a camera zooms out and takes in the wide picture, it's able to see the big things, right? I think I said if you were in an airplane or a helicopter and you were looking down at the landscape, you would see big patterns. You'd say, hey, there's the ocean, there's a hill, there's a city, right? You wouldn't be able to see anything in detail, but you could take in the big landscape. That is what I wanted you to think about in terms of rhetorical appeals. So I'm talking about ethos, logos, pathos. Those are general ideas. They're general ways of trying to convince an audience. They are not detailed techniques. You need to, in your writing, have a balance between the big appeals, right, where you zoom out with your camera and you say, hey, in the first couple paragraphs, the author is appealing to the ethos of the audience by taking on a persona of an informed, authoritative, and confident speaker. You would give me the big things, but you have to balance that with the more nuanced, more detailed observations about devices. So that's why the title of this is Rhetorical Analysis, the Appeal Device Connection, because simply put, you really have to have both. So my former analogy was when you zoom out with a camera, you take in the New York skyline and you see all the buildings. And there's the ethos building and the logos building and the pathos building. And you can, in a general way, write about those, right? That's awesome. But then you have to zoom in into that building and see what's holding it up. And that is what your devices are. Okay? So, again, I looked at it like appeals are the buildings, all right? But the devices are the materials that create those buildings and keep them standing. So the devices are the steel beams and the concrete, but the appeals are ultimately the buildings. And you need to discuss both. Okay, so appeals must be connected to devices. And I'm talking about what goes on in your body paragraphs. I'm not going to review everything now, but again, in your introduction, the first thing you're doing probably is setting up the rhetorical situation. And we had that acronym SOAPS. We also have just the general idea of the rhetorical triangle. But you need to tell me what is the message, who's the speaker, who is the likely audience, what is the objective, what are they trying to do, what's the occasion. You have to give me all that pedigree information. I need to know what the situation is. Once you establish that in your introduction, now you study what the text is doing. And that again is appeals must be connected to devices. Okay, they are connected. So I don't know how necessary this is, but it cannot hurt. A general review of appeals would include ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is always going to be the idea that the writer is projecting a moral superiority or a, admirable sense of right and wrong. Often more important than the message itself or the techniques is your faith in the author or the speaker. If you believe that the author or the speaker is not moral, that they lack a certain sense of right or wrong, you're not going to listen to them because you're going to think, well, you know what? They're not for lack of a better term, they're not a good person. And I don't want to follow what it is they have to tell me. I'm not going to buy what they're selling because I don't buy them. I don't buy the image or the projection of who they are. So ethos not only has to do with morality, but it also has to do with expertise and authority. If they can convey to you through their language that they know what they're talking about, or that you should trust them because they have experience, or that they just are confident enough to, be a leader, or, to just kind of, give you an accurate account of what they're saying, then they have successfully appealed to ethos. Logos can also be smoke and mirrors. Logos is not always 100% something that you should look at as legitimate, right? Ethos can be faked. Ethos can be, a magical illusion. It could be a trick. It could be just artifice, and so could logos. But logos in its purest form is an appeal to logic. What that really means is that there is factuality. There is cause and effect. When a claim is made, it is supported by some type of reasoning, some type of data, some information. There are grounds that support the claim or the premise that is being put out there. So logos, again, is not necessarily the character or the morality of the speaker. It's just usually a matter of organization. When they create a statement, are they supporting it with some information, right? Is there a logical train, a line of reasoning that supports what they're saying? All right. So I always think of logos kind of like science class or mathematics, where you can look through a detailed account of procedures or processes. You can look at information that supports a hypothesis. All right. Finally, pathos, I'll keep it brief. It's an appeal to emotion. When you write about it, you definitely want to explain what the emotion is. You don't simply want to say, the introduction to the speech involves an appeal to pathos. That could be anything. Is it, national guilt? Is it an enlightened consciousness of racial inequality? Is it an appeal to patriotism? It could be virtually anything, right? Think about how many emotions and feelings are out there. So you really want to just, zoom in on that a little bit and be more specific about what is being appealed to in the consciousness of the audience. But anyway, that's a little review of what these big buildings are on the horizon. These are the big things you're going to get hit on the head with when you read any kind of persuasive text. The devices, these are our tried and true devices that we've been playing around with all year. And there they are. Diction obviously is a building block of tone. It's a building block of a bigger impression. So if you find that the writer is, exhibiting a pattern of diction, it's not just, they said this one word, but a lot of the words they share a connotation, or they share a certain idea, right? Perhaps a lot of the language consists of legal jargon. Perhaps there's a medical or clinical type of, pattern emerging through word choice. Maybe the word choice is very judgmental. It's very value laden. Things like good, evil. Diction is what it is. But to write about it, you really need to pull out a pattern and show me some individual word choices. Allusion, everyone in our class is using this as a device constantly, but you do not always call it allusion. Anytime you note that the speaker is referring to something outside the text, I don't care if it's Abraham Lincoln or Greek mythology or Horace, the Roman orator, or whatever. If you are noticing that the text you're reading is referring to anecdotes or episodes or just information that really is outside the context of what we're reading, then that is an allusion. And allusions, as we'll get to, are often harbingers of ethos. They help to instill confidence and authority in that writer. People metaphor, simile, personification, that all falls under figurative language. This is not a fiction course. If we were studying poetry, for example, there'd be a lot of that. But figurative language certainly exists in political speeches. It exists in letters people write to each other. So that's alive and well. Syntax is sentence structure. All right. Tone, again, is an attitude projected by the author, often the result of things like perhaps allusion or diction or figurative language. Organization is how did they set it up, right? Is there a logic to the way they constructed these things? So are these difficult to write about? You're going to take your pick. You're going to find some of these are more transparent. You notice them easier. Others you might look at, for example, syntax, and say, well, I really don't feel like I'm going to write about sentence structure. That's fine. But I'd like to show you a list of other devices that you might not be appreciating that are less commonly thought of as devices, but I feel are much more accessible. In other words, you're noticing these all the time, but you might not realize you can write about them and you can connect them to those appeals. People, selection of detail, think about that. That could be anything. But why are they including these details, let's say, but the author's not including these other details? Why would they, focus in on this one element but leave out other things? If you're discussing their choices that they made when providing details, then you're dealing with selection of detail. People, any description, right? When they really go through great lengths to give you, detailed, small, granular observations. I think of Ring of Time with the symbol of the equestrian riding in the circle. Well, that's descriptive writing. That's a device. So is selection of detail. Are they making a comparison? Are they contrasting two different things, holding them next to each other? There's also that word juxtaposition, right? Where two things are kind of held up together and to kind of exhibit their differences and their similarities, perhaps. So is there a comparison going on? Contradiction, that's such a general term, contradiction, but are they making a point and then negating that point? That's contradiction. Obviously, humor is based on exaggeration often, right? Humor is right up there with the last column, hyperbole. Are they exaggerating something to a tremendous degree? It might not be humorous if they're doing that. They might be trying to frighten you. That might be a pathos type of appeal. But often humor can be satirical. It's when we kind of make fun of pre-existing social institutions. If you make fun of government or the church, or you make fun of the media, or the right or the left, that's humor, right? Often humor is tied into irony. We think of irony more in terms of literature, and there are different types of irony, but we can just say irony is when two things are put together, like paradox, perhaps, oxymoronic associations. Two things go together that really do not belong together. They're showing you a glaring contradiction of terms, right? So I'm just saying irony, if you notice it, could be a device. An anecdote is when you tell a short little story in the middle of a larger, perhaps more formal speech or piece of writing. So if I'm trying to convince you to vote a certain way, but then all of a sudden I tell you about a fishing trip I took with my father, and I described the clouds on that day and how I was feeling, that is storytelling. An anecdote is a short little narrative. But if you notice somebody in a speech doing that, that's a device. Imagery, just as if this was a fiction class, is descriptive writing, what you can see, smell, hear, or taste through detailed writing. Understatement, of course, is the opposite of hyperbole, right? And this is going to sound so obvious, but factual support. If the author is providing statistics, numbers, historical precedents, if they're providing any type of cold, hard facts, information, numbers, whatever, to support a claim, that I would call it factual support. You could call it textual support, perhaps, but that's a device. So these are just types of, devices that are all over the place that you might not realize you can use. People, I cannot give you 100% guarantees. This is not a universal law. But I notice that often certain devices are going to be more conducive to certain appeals. They're going to lend themselves to those appeals. Diction is almost always going to be pathos and ethos. Because think about it, if I use a lot of emotionally charged language or divisive language, language that might make certain people upset, it might divide people, or language that really scares people, right? Certain trigger words out there make people very nervous. Well, that's pathos. It's certainly ethos. If I have an elevated vocabulary or a very technical vocabulary, I'm probably showing the reader that I know what I'm talking about. If I'm a doctor and I'm writing about stem cell research, I'm going to use some words that someone else might not use, and they're hopefully going to instill confidence. Allusion is showing ethos and pathos as well. If I allude to something tragic that's happened in history, whether it be the slave trade or 9/11 or the Holocaust, if I'm alluding to those, it's going to rip at the heartstrings of some people. That's pathos because of what I'm choosing to allude to. But it also shows my knowledge of the world. Okay? I'm running out of time, people, but take a look at those. Okay? And you'll see that there's kind of a pattern there. All right? Finally, these all kind of are conducive to pathos. All right? And this is what should be bodying your body paragraphs.